Thanks, Dan. So before we get to Dan and start beginning the discussion on the revenue streams that have emerged in the digital media sector with branded content, I want the panel to introduce themselves and tell the audience a little bit about what they are doing within their companies and what they have done, so that we can then get into the discussion. So, Janet, do you want to start off?
So I'm Janet. I am the CEO of The Coverture, which is a content site, and I'll tell you a little bit more later on about what we do. In terms of my background, started my career at Procter & Gamble, where I was a brand manager, then moved to McKinsey & Company, it's a consulting firm, spent 8 years at eBay, including 3 years in Silicon Valley. In Canada, I started a website called Kijiji, grew that business to be one of the most visited sites in Canada, and also led the global Kijiji business for a few years.
Aya?
So my name is Aya Norris. I lead marketing and community for Indiegogo in Canada. We're the largest open crowdfunding platform in the world. I'll tell you a little bit more about all the cool things we're up to. I went to business school, had a background in corporate marketing before I fast realized that wasn't the world for me. I dove into the creative world. I've got a documentary web series called The Insight Project that I work on as well, which I crowdfunded, so that's how I got into the world of crowdfunding. And have been loving working with Indiegogo so far.
And Mark?
My name is Mark Skipinker. I'm managing partner of a venture capital firm called Brightspark Ventures here in Toronto. We invest in technology and media companies, usually at an equity level of investment. Over the last year, we've changed our model into the crowdfunding model, and we do most of our deals today with crowdfunding in equity deals with what are called accredited investors.
Great. So as you can see, we've got 4 incredible, innovative panelists here today to talk about these new revenue streams that have emerged, and one, of course, being branded content, and then the other one, crowdfunding. So what I thought we'd do today is really start off with branded content and addressing Dan and the case study, and then, of course, with Janet with the Coverture from a publishing perspective. So my question to you, Dan, to start off is, how does one get a phone call from Target to say, hey, we think you're this cool, hip band, electronic band, and we want you to take an iconic song from a beloved children's series, Mr. Rogers, and we want you to put a unique twist to it? Like, how does that actually happen?
Well, I actually called them last week to ask them how that happened, so that, and I addressed it a little bit in what I said, where I don't think, Target would admit that they have made some mistakes, but I think they make very few uneducated decisions. She said the reason why we were chosen was because we had a track record as being X kind of Canadian band, that we sounded like a happy band, and Target is happy, and that they also, I think they had to satisfy the owners of the song, of Mr. Rogers' estate, with presenting an act that wasn't too subversive or too problematic, I suppose, in order to actually get the rights to reproduce the song. And but I actually think it ended up coming through an American ad agency, through that American sync agency that has got us all the work so far.
And what was the backlash from the consumers? Because there was some negative feedback from the public because of taking the Mr. Rogers theme song.
How can you ruin my favorite song from when I was 6 years old? Was the most, and maybe we did for some people, for sure. I think it was actually, from a creative and technical standpoint, it was a hell of a challenge. The song is a waltz, and it's really slow, and we had to turn it into a fun dance song, which is in a different meter, and we had to change the melody and whatever. But I read a lot of the comments, and I think either it was, you ruined my favorite song, or this band is terrible for aligning themselves with Target, who put Zellers out of business, and blah, 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 or whatever, which were a lot of the other press that had nothing to do with us at the time. And so, just I think, to your point, we were prepared to weather that storm.
But from a branded content perspective, like, how does you're traditionally making, record deals. How do you get into a branded content and doing corporate branding for shows like The Vampire Diaries? And do you think this is something that musicians are going to say you're compromising and authenticity is being lost, or are you compromising yourself from an artistic perspective by being involved in branded content?
I think that it's been a dirty little secret of a lot of bands for a very long time. And then somewhere along the last 10 years, I think that's flipped entirely, and people are in some cases celebrate the relationship between a brand and an artist. I think in terms of playing corporate shows, licensing your music to film, TV, commercials, whatever, the minute you open the door and to putting your song in a not-for-profit indie documentary, you are to some degree breaking the seal, and you can go. I think you can ruin your brand by associating it with your band with associating it with the wrong kind of brands, or if you overexpose yourselves. But in almost every case where I've seen our song in a TV show or in a film, it's been chosen because it works really well and to complement the story that's being told at the time.
Does it grow your fan base? Like, what does your true hardcore fans, do they think you're selling yourself short by doing that? I get why a brand does it, because they want to, take your following, take your community, and attach themselves to it. But for yourself, does it actually increase your sales from your artistic music, not from the song that was for a target, but as a true musician or
It
an
would be
artist?
hard to measure whether we were selling, like you see little blips, for example, on iTunes the day after the song airs on Vampire Diaries, but or any other show for that matter. But it would be hard. The financial upside we limit to just what we get paid for the song to be put on the show, and in terms of what impact it has on our fans, the greatest activity on Twitter or whatever, any social media about our band occurs when everybody sees for the first time a TV episode and hears our song in it, and then there's a whole ripple of activity about it. It's always positive on that level. And I think in some cases it actually helps fans feel that their band the band that they like is more legitimate or bigger or more popular, and it's something better to associate with.
Really, because I'm thinking, do you think that at some point consumers are going to catch on and say, you're selling yourself short because you're now you're creating this because at the end of the day, the brand Target is trying to drive people in store, or brand X is trying to sell. I mean, we'll get to Jane in a second with the couture, where at the consumers are going to realize that they're trying to sell Louis Vuittons, right, with their branded content. So I'm playing the devil's advocate here, where our consumers going to realize that traditional media is not working because people are PVRing, and then are we now getting into branded content because we want to make sure that it's not PVR'd, or people are going online and watching and engaging with the brand, but eventually they're going to say brands are doing this because they're ultimately going to try to sell product.
But I don't think in our case they're trying to...
You're trying to sell music.
Yeah, I mean, well, what we're trying to do is be able to be a band, and when, as I said, one Target ad pays us the equivalent of 2.5 record advances. That takes a lot of pressure off having to enter into record deals that, by and large, in our experience, have been more limiting than promoting.
Okay, I'm going to get into Jane now. Or Janet, sorry. Janet, I keep doing that. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about what the couture is and some of the challenges initially with the founder and how that all came about?
Yeah, so basically the couture is an online destination, so a content website for sort of exclusive behind-the-scenes access. And so we go behind the scenes with celebrities, tastemakers, with brands, and with events, and we profile them. And so, for instance, every day we will profile, often it's say a celebrity or a tastemaker. We go into their homes, we profile what are the unique items that are in their home, what is their personal take on fashion, and we put that on the website. We've gone behind the scenes to the Victoria's Secret fashion show, behind the scenes at the London fashion show, and profiled those things on the site. In terms of brands, we've gone into Coco Chanel's apartment, and so we're really all about bringing our readers, bringing our community behind the scenes to have an exclusive access into these areas where most consumers can't go. And so the types of people who we have profiled on the site, Tommy Hilfiger, Kaylee Kawoko, Jessica Alba. Today, Sarah Jessica Parker is featured on the website.
So tell us why branded content is important to native marketing in the digital publishing world.
Yeah, so basically most of our revenue comes from branded content. And by branded content, what I mean is that we work with brands to create engaging stories that are both engaging to our readers, and so our readers actually want to read about it, and as well, it delivers on the brand's objectives of raising awareness and/or positioning their brand in the appropriate light. Throughout the industry, native advertising or branded content is growing extremely quickly. And the reason is that brands are recognizing, well, obviously they got to spend time, they have to spend money online because that's where their consumers are. However, traditional display advertising is just not working, right? It's just, consumers have become, they ignore it. For one thing, banner blindness is happening. And then on mobile, which is obviously is increasingly, consumers are increasingly using mobile, display advertising or banner ads are even less effective. And so brands are saying, okay, how can I engage with my consumers? How can I portray my brand in the right light? How can I increase my brand awareness online if I'm not going to use display advertising? And so, as I said, we work with brands, brands like Chanel, Tommy Hilfiger, Louis Vuitton, and other brands, Bloomingdale's, and we work with them to tell their unique story to our readers, and we do so in a way that is compelling and interesting to our readers. And so we work hand in hand. Our editorial team, as well as the sales team, works hand in hand, and we're very conscious about making sure that the branded content that we produce and that we put on the site is something that is true to our brand and, as I said, is relevant and interesting for our readers.
So traditionally, Janet, editorial, it's been a church and state. You could never, from having been in sales for the last 20 years of my life, whenever we wanted to do editorials or touch anchor people and try to attach a brand to it, it's always been no, 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 no. How did you, in your world, be able to collaborate with sales and editorial and fuse the two so that you can beautifully create these stories that are really engaging? Because I think fashion has been leading edge in this. I think of anyone in the various categories and various brands, fashion has been the one category that has been doing phenomenal in terms of the branded content. And explain to us, how have you been able to kind of break those walls down?
Yeah, and I think we have an advantage in that. So the Coverture was started 3 years ago, and so we never had those traditional walls to begin with. We started doing branded content when the website was 3 months old, and there were just the 3 co-founders sitting around a table, right? And so they were never the traditional walls. They were never created, and so we didn't have to break them down. But you're right that we actually do a lot of work with magazines. We work with Elle, with Insta, with Harper's Bazaar, all in the US. And we are hired by these magazines to produce their branded content a lot of times because they cannot execute it effectively because of the traditional walls between editorial and and sales, and they just can't. This whole church and state, they just can't understand each other. They can't work together, and I mean, for us, it's actually beneficial, as I say, because we're able to step in there and work directly with magazines to help them.
So how do you keep the authenticity there? Like, would certain magazines think it would be beneath them to do this, like a Walrus magazine? Like, how does that live and breathe within that world? I
mean, we always, as I said, we make sure that it's relevant to consumers, that our consumers would want to see it. So for instance, we did something with Chanel where we went over to Paris and we went into Coco Chanel's apartment and we shot that and we photographed that and we put that up on their website. I mean, our users love that content. Today, for instance, we're featuring a video that we did with Sarah Jessica Parker, who is introducing a new line of shoes, and we are breaking the story about these new shoes. I mean, people who love fashion, they want to find out about Sarah Jessica Parker's new shoe line and see a video of her talking about it, right?
Or check out her closet.
Exactly, or check out her closet. And so we make sure that it's because we work together, the editorial and the sales team work so closely together and they both understand each other, we make sure that we produce content that our readers like, and ultimately that's what our brands want anyways, because they want to make sure that our readers are engaging with their content. And so, we're all on the same team.
So what are the lessons that maybe you can pass along to some of the publishers in this room? I know that e-commerce was one of the challenges that you had initially in the beginning.
Yes.
And do you feel that that's a good revenue source for publishers or not?
Yeah, no, so about, a year and a half ago or so, we went very heavily into e-commerce, and I think this is one area where a lot of publishers went into. Say a year and a half, 2 years ago, the thinking was, hey, you have readers who are reading your content, you should also be selling the things, right? Hey, we've got all these readers who are there, they're looking at this item in this person's closet. Doesn't it make sense to say, hey, let's sell their items? And it is an important revenue stream. We have something on our website called Shop the Look, and you can click on it and you can purchase a similar item. However, that revenue stream is not as significant to us as branded content. And I think something that I've seen, really the publishing industry has, and particularly in the US, they've really sort of come around to this in the last 6 months, is that the thought that, hey, content and commerce is going to be, that's the solution, and the savior for publishing is going to be selling things alongside their products, has really not panned out. And we've seen a lot of leading US magazines walk away from huge investments in commerce. Again, it's not, and there's other businesses, for instance, Refinery29, which made a big investment in content, in commerce, and they have scaled that back. So, again, who knows, maybe I think at some point somebody will figure it out, hey, how do you merge content and commerce? But nobody has really sort of cracked that nut yet, and so my feeling is, hey, absolutely, if you're a content publisher, it's very easy to sell products, you should do that, and there's some positive revenue there, but don't rely on that as that's going to be your sole revenue source.
Okay, so I think now what we should do is talk about our second revenue model, and that is crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. And we've got two different perspectives. We've got Aya, which is going to talk to us about and really give us the definition of what crowdfunding is from a general public perspective. And then Mark's going to define it from more of sophisticated investors that are accredited and kind of come together to fund certain projects. So Aya, why don't I pass it over to you, and you can tell the audience what crowdfunding is.
Yeah, so crowdfunding is basically a large group of people pooling their resources to bring an idea to life. And people often look at it as just funding. There's a host of other benefits which I'll talk about, but it's really about people creating things together. And we were founded on the notion of not having any gatekeepers in finance, not having anybody, standing at the door saying you should get funded or you shouldn't get funded. We're a totally open platform with no application process, no restrictions upon, what your project can or cannot be. And that's, really where we see the future being is an open crowdfunding.
Why don't you tell us some of the projects that have been successful, and are there any categories that don't work, that don't make sense, that people put up and post?
We've seen everything and anything, whatever you can think of, it's probably been crowdfunded. So there's three kind of main categories that we bucket under. First is creative. That's probably where most of you would fall into the room. That's where we'd look at publishing, films, games, all of that type of stuff. We've got entrepreneurial. That can range from a small restaurant that wants to open up all the way to the latest tech gadget that goes on to raise over $1 million. And we have community, cause-oriented campaigns ranging from nonprofits that want to raise money for new initiatives to somebody who might have a family member or friend that's ill and want to raise money to kind of help them out. We had the first crowdfunded baby, which I was talking about at dinner last night. It's one of my favorites. A couple. This this is really where you can get into, the wild side of open crowdfunding. We had a couple who needed in vitro fertilization, and they put up a video saying why they wanted to be parents, and they rallied family and friends who believed in them, contributed, but it also, just because it was so out there, kind of went viral. They had complete strangers contribute. It ended up working. They had the baby, so.
What was the largest amount that has been raised? I think there's like over 200,000 different
yeah, we've had nearly
projects.
200,000 campaigns all across the globe. We're open to countries all around the world. The most pledged actually for any crowdfunding campaign ever was on Indiegogo, and that was for the Ubuntu Edge smartphone. We had over $12 million pledged for that, yeah, which was a lot.
But again, I'm going to take the devil's advocate. How do you know certain projects are legitimate, and someone along the way is going to scam somebody, right? They're going to be collecting money, and it's going to not even be a project. Like, how do you guys legitimize it to make sure that this stuff is, real projects, and they're going towards a real film or a real in vitro? Who knows if that couple really needs it?
Yeah.
How do you make sure that these things are real?
There's two. We've got an amazing team at our office, our fraud team, that's checking through campaigns that are both being built in draft mode as well as campaigns that are live, using the latest tools and technology, similar to how credit card companies would flag for fraudulent transactions. So we do have a team that's working on that, but honestly, by nature of crowdfunding, it kind of prevents fraud in itself, because across the board from all the campaigns we see the first 25 to 30% of what is raised is coming from your own network. Whether that's family, friends, whether it's fans that have been following you for a long time, it's your own network that validates you and says, we know and trust this person, and only after that point does it kind of go viral and start spreading around to different networks. So it is your early network that's going to validate you, and so if they won't put the money up, if they know that you're a little bit of a shady, sketchy person, you're not going to raise what you need.
There's no way Mark's company or group of investors would invest in any of those projects. Or unless there have been some great examples that have been validated, and that's where they go to Mark and get some more additional funds.
We're seeing it almost in a way kind of replace seed funding for, especially when you get to the high tech companies. We had a company, Interaxon, that's Toronto-based. They had a Muse brain sensing headband, and they had actually tried to find funding for that for a while, and they were knocking on doors, and people said, a brain sensing headband, I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to fund that, right?
Mark, you would have turned that down.
I'm sorry?
You would have turned that down.
We did.
You did? There you go.
So the team went to Indiegogo and they put it out. They raised nearly 300,000 people. They validated their idea. They got incredible feedback from their market. They built it themselves, and they went on to raise $6 million in their Series A financing from some really reputable VCs. So we're seeing it kind of work in the ecosystem together. So hopefully we can collaborate.
Okay, so let's segue now into Mark then. Why don't you explain to the crowd how your accredited investors get together and
Sure. Traditionally, you had two ways that investments were being made. So we're talking about people who invest in a company where they buy shares, they get ownership, they get some equity in the company. Obviously, in a public company where there's a public marketplace, you can go to a stock exchange and buy shares. But for early stage companies, traditionally you saw the venture capital firms who were funded from large institutions go after a certain kind of investment. And if individuals wanted to invest in those companies, they were usually shut out unless they went in at the earliest stage as what were called angel investors. So angel investors would typically join an angel group or a group of other investors, go in as individuals. They'd have to be reasonably sophisticated because they'd have to figure out what are the terms, how am I going to figure out how to monitor this company, how do I know whether the price is right or whether the terms that are sitting there are right. But if they had some level of sophistication, as an angel investor, they could invest. Institutions would typically give money to venture capitalists as a large amount and say, go ahead, here's some money, go ahead for the next 10 years and invest this money. As I think anybody who's involved in this industry knows, the traditional venture capital industry has been on the decline significantly, particularly in Canada. In Canada, we probably had on on the tech and media side, maybe 30 venture capital firms in 1999, 2000, and today there's no more than half a dozen left. Most of the traditional investors, most of the traditional institutions have left the marketplace and have decided that it's not an interesting marketplace for them, so they've moved out of the marketplace. What we're doing is we're opening up the opportunity for individuals and small investors to get back into this marketplace. So we are still venture capitalists. We still find the right companies. When we do find the right companies, we negotiate a term sheet. We negotiate what the terms are going to look like. And then we open up the opportunity to invest in a fund that we specifically create for that investment to the community. Say, who wants to invest in this company? You'll invest in a specific fund that we'll have set up. We'll invest in that company for you. We'll have negotiated the terms. We'll monitor the company. We'll follow the company. We'll deal with board issues, follow-on issues, and hopefully work with the company to some future success and a return on your investment. This model is fairly new. It's been in the US probably for about 3 or 4 years. There are 1 or 2 in England. There's a successful company in Israel, and we're the first to be doing this in Canada. We've been doing it for a fairly short time, and we're in the process now of opening this up quite widely. In the US, you do have other models which are quite similar but are not allowed to function in Canada, such as AngelList. AngelList you can raise in the US from US investors, but it's essentially not legal to run AngelList deals within Canada, but we run AngelList deals for US investors in conjunction that we do with what we do so that we can open up to the mass market of investors in the US as well as the accredited investors. The way the laws are set up in Canada is that you have to be called what's an accredited investor, and that means you have to pass various thresholds proving that you have some level of wealth or sophistication in terms of what you know. But in Canada, there are 500,000 accredited investors. So it's a fairly large group of people who can make such investments.
So the differences between Aya and yourself, I mean, Aya, when you're in general public investing, you're not owning equity or you're not getting shares or buying into the company. You're just getting maybe a T-shirt or something like that.
We're investing we're investors who are giving you equity. You are going to get shares, and hopefully one day when that company does well, you'll be successful. So we're very focused on companies that we can have a comfort level that will go on and become value creators and have a return at some stage.
So Mark, why don't you tell the audience, because probably there's people in this room that would love to talk to you, but what's your appetite in terms of companies? Is it in content? Is it gaming? Is it entertainment? Is it tech? Like, what is it that you're actually looking for in investing in?
We're reasonably specific. Because we came out of the technology area, we generally like a level of intellectual property, which means we like some type of value in either product or in a value creation base. We also try to look for companies that are already in business. So we're well past the idea stage, which is why it makes sense for us to work with people like Indiegogo, because that's that early stage when, gee, I've got a great idea, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. I'll get some people to join in, like the Muse product. By the time you have a product and you've got a revenue model and you understand what your customer looks like and you understand how you're going to sell it and how you're going to make money, that's the time that we're interested. We're fairly early stage, so whereas the traditional venture capital industry wants you to first prove things out and then offer you ramp-up model, there are a number of us who are in the earlier stage where it's early revenue, you're still not quite sure what your customer looks like and what they're going to pay, but you do know that you've got a product that you can sell to somebody.
I'm going to ask this question to Aya. Aya, how long do you think that your model is sustainable? Like, when will the novelty wear off where I'm going to be, donating $25 to get my name as part of a film credit next to Leonardo DiCaprio? Like, when does that interest fade away? Like, because I get it with Mark, but in your model, is it going to eventually die off?
I mean, the growth that we've seen is incredible, and like I said, it's about groups of passionate people creating something together, and I don't think that is going to slow or die. I think we're seeing that kind of decentralization happening, across the board in the world, and so I think the growth is going to keep going as long as people keep coming up with innovative ideas that they're passionate about and finding that, other group, even all across the world, that's passionate about it too. It's like with the internet, this is made for niche things, right?
But there must be some pitches that actually do phenomenal. Like, I'm going to ask this to you and Mark. So, in your world, what were the best pitches that got the best results? And also, Mark, once I answers that, why don't you tell us what you think are the ones that best deliver and get results from your group of investors? So, why don't you start off? Like, what were the best examples of ideas that were posted up? Is there a formula to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of three keys to crowdfunding in the pitch. One is tell a really compelling story, right? So find that part that pulls, that touches somebody's heart in whatever way that is, whether they're a fan of your band or whether they're somebody who cares about your community project. So storytelling is incredibly huge for us. Give a compelling perk, right, from recognition, from a physical object or a digital good, to a one-of-a-kind experience that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise, and be really proactive in outreach. I think one of the biggest mistakes with crowdfunding is telling a great story, building cool perks, and clicking launch and waiting for people to come. You have to be really proactive in finding that market that cares and engaging them in what you're doing.
What do you mean by that? Like, how would someone be proactive? Like, is it posting on your Facebook page? Is it word of mouth? How does it go viral so that people hear about it?
So getting a strong start from your early audience and knowing who those people are is really key. So we see the first kind of third, generally on average, the first third is coming from your own networks. And then we see it spread from there, shares to kind of concentric circles, niche blogs, that type of stuff. And then we see we're a fully merit-based platform. So we've built a large community all across the world that contribute to multiple campaigns. And what we feature in our email list, on social media, on our homepage, is all based on the crowd and whatever is the most popular. We've got an algorithm similar to Google PageRank that is measuring what the most popular campaigns are, and that's what we promote. So that's where we see people kind of go viral and get opened up to our global audience.
Mark, what about in your experience?
Yeah, I think in our world it's just the next step of that. From our perspective, somebody who can draw or paint a picture of something that one day will be really compelling. You want to meet Jim Bell-Silly where he says, "See this little thing, I'm going to make a smartphone." That's the person who's going to be successful. That's the excitement. You all saw the person at lunch who was talking about the bubble cam, who's sort of you start building a picture in your head of what it can or can't be. Certainly in our world, we're dealing with a time and an investment basis, and part of the reason that we deal with accredited investors is that some of our investments can go to zero. It's not like investing in some real estate or investing in Google stock. Some of our investments, you put your money in and you get back a zero. So we're obviously dealing with investors who, A, need the sophistication level to be able to be willing to do that, and we've got to have people who are willing to lose all the money that they put into the investment. The companies that do the worst is, that person who stands up in front of you and talks for 10 minutes and then you say, "What do you do again?" That's the problematic deal. That's really the deal where you scratch your head and you say, "Well, you know what, you've just spoken for like half an hour and I still don't know what you do." Those are obviously the ones that have difficulty. The challenge that we all have is those are sometimes the most successful guys.
Okay, so before we open it up to questions, I'm going to go to each one of you and see if maybe you can give a takeaway on your respective sectors and how the revenue model from branded content to crowdsourcing that maybe you want to leave with the audience if they're interested in the models and starting out as well. So maybe from a musician artist standpoint, how that model makes sense for a new artist or a band, et cetera, as a new revenue stream.
I think in our case, what I talked about doesn't apply to a new band. I think it's a fantasy to think that Target is going to phone up somebody who has no track record. To some degree, it's almost like what Mark was saying. I think that they're counting on a level of
expertise and track record and history. In the case of, I think the takeaway is that I think both bands and brands are hesitant to approach these kind of relationships because there's a lot of, I think, ill will about bands selling out and brands stealing bands' identities. And I think the relationship is much closer and is going to continue to get closer as it becomes a much more necessary financial or like a revenue stream for bands where record sales all but disappear.
Janet, from you?
I think it would be that branded content is a very fast-growing and lucrative revenue stream for publishers. But in order to be successful, you need to ensure that the content meets the needs of your readers and is something that the readers are engaging with. And to do that, you need to make sure that the editorial and the sales team work hand in hand.
For us, I'd say, funding is an obvious, incredible element of crowdfunding, but it's really, truly far more than that, and that's what all of our campaigners tell us. It's an amazing way to validate your idea, to build awareness, to get feedback from your audience, to engage an existing community. So there are just so many benefits to crowdfunding past just raising money.
I think for us, the more credibility that you can have from a customer perspective, from a market perspective, from a validation perspective, the easier it is to reach the cold investor. A lot of our investors are looking at, show me why this is going to get me 20 times my money. So if the more you can show a real customer using it, or a real model, or a real technology, or something that works, that's not just waving your hands wildly in the air, the more success you're going to have.
Okay, I think we should open it up now to some questions.
Hi. Hi, thanks. Kevin Bartis, Ideon Media and Maple Media. Janet, a question for you on selling branded content. Yes. So typically the question is, are you more successful going to the PR agencies or the media buying agencies or the client direct? Most people answer the client direct. But within that, what is the sales model? I mean, do you come up with a sample concept that they can then buy into or not? How do you shape the actual offering? Often the client wants to shove in their own people, and what does that sales process look like?
Yeah, so I would say it's a consultative sales process. So we work with, as you say, a lot of our work is brand direct. And we work with the client to understand, and a lot of them, of course, depending upon the client, they come with different starting points, right? Some clients will just say, hey, here's my objective. We've never done branded content before. What can you guys do, right? And then we will develop, okay, well, here's the, do you want to have an influencer? Here's the type of influencer. Here's how we could do it. Of course, that's all sort of predicated on understanding who their target audience is, what their objectives are, and things like that. Other times, they will come to us and they will say, hey, you know what, we've seen all your work, and this is what we want, right? But I think what we are involved in because of sort of the heritage of our site, we have incredible access to people. And so a lot of times our work will involve hiring a tastemaker or an influencer to be in the branded content. Does that answer your question? Okay.
All right.
Yep, down there.
Over here.
Should I go?
Yeah, Brian Stewart, Tribute Entertainment. Question is, who retains the rights to the branded content once it's been utilized? Do you retain it as a company, or does the sponsor
Yeah,
or the one paying the bill retain the rights?
So that depends on, it's all negotiated, and most of our site and what we're really known for is our photography. So a lot of it is the photography rights, right? Who retains the ownership to that? If it's sort of at the base level, or sorry, in all situations, if it's just the base level sort of payment, then we retain those rights. If they want to pay more, then they can use that photography. And how they use the photography, the rates go up. And so we have had clients who use our photography in ad campaigns. We work with an Australian brand, and they actually used our photography in an outdoor ad campaign. They obviously paid more for that.
All right. Now, what do you do when it comes to international rights? Do you charge based upon U.S. rights, territorial rights,
No,
by
we
country?
charge more. Again, it depends what sort of rights. If do they just want U.S. rights? Do they want international rights? It's all negotiated.
Mostly international, or you mostly do U.S.?
Mostly international. We're very international. I mean, we've worked with, it's mostly international. Or I should say global. It's mostly global rights.
Julie Whelan from Nordicity. I just have a question for Aya. I myself have, given money to a screen content thing on Indiegogo, and I was a little surprised at the lag between the kind of ending of the funding and the successful funding and this, when the product actually launches. And I wondered if you're working to kind of help people share or communicate better with their funders so that they are better prepared for that lag, because there's kind of a big expectation, big build-up, and then a real, I think it's been 2 years or something like that since I only put $20 in, but, because you want me to have a good experience with Indiegogo and sort of go back again to that, for that experience, but part of that you want your, the people on there to communicate well with anyone who puts up any money. So I just wondered if that's part of your kind of, education piece or helping people to succeed for your own brand kind of protection.
Absolutely. As we work with our campaigners and all of the educational resources that we put out, from building your campaign all the way to fulfilling your campaign, it's something that's really key for us to make sure that people fulfill on time, right? So whatever it is that you promise, that you are fulfilling by that date, and we work with them to help set those realistic timelines, especially when you get into some of the big tech campaigns and they go into the manufacturing process, you never know, right? With filmmaking, who knows what came up? But I think too, what we hone in on with people is to just really keep your community engaged and aware. So we've had people say, hey, because we did so well in our campaign, we've had the opportunity to maybe go to a new location and shoot something that's going to take a little bit longer, but do you guys want to see this involved? And so we have people, we really want to make sure that people who are contributing are definitely aware throughout the process. But yeah, it is a big focus for us in our educational support that we put out.
Any more questions, or? Oh, there.
Hi, my name is Joanne Fishburne, and I work as an impact producer. And so what I do is I build social impact campaigns around documentary films. And with less and less people kind of paying for content, I really do see this branded content and sponsorship as a new way for distribution. And so one of the things that I'm now moving into is creating some kind of finance models for those campaigns, right? And so I'm kind of making things up as I go. And I feel that there's already probably a lot of expertise in this area through big ad agencies. And I guess one of the things I'm looking to understand more is to understand, if you can deliver a certain amount of eyeballs or exposure for brands, how do you know what that's worth? And then how do you, we'd love to bring, I can see building a national campaign that, based on your strategy can promise a certain number of exposure, right, based on the partners you bring on. And so I guess one of the things that I'm, looking for assistance in is, figuring out those models that are going to make sense, and what is that worth to like, let's say, a big corporation. And so I'm just it's one of those things where I find that kind of a sync agent, is really, really interesting, because they kind of understand, they put a dollar value on what you're providing. And I guess for me, I feel like there's a knowledge gap in terms of kind of understanding what a campaign is worth. And then obviously you have to develop a sponsorship package and pitch it and deliver it. But I guess it's, how do you know what you're worth?
Who wants to answer that?
Do you want me to take I guess you could say you're worth whatever people will pay for it. But I think, there's a lot of questions like anything, right? You can look at if, for instance, they're putting branded content on our website, then we look at, okay, how many eyeballs is that going to reach? Well, it's very targeted, so you're not going to, it's a different rate. You can't just put a flat CPM on it. There's a lot of different variables. So, but I think as a whole, like most of our businesses in the U.S., we're very focused on the U.S. market, and even in the U.S. we find people are still figuring this out, right? Because it's a new area and it's evolving quickly. I think people are still trying to. It's not sort of as cut and dry as traditional display advertising, where you can say, hey, the CPM is X, right? There's a lot of different variables. How prominent is the branding? Does the article go on the home page? How long is it on the home page? What type of social media do you use? Was mentioned before, who owns the content afterwards, right? And so, I don't know if this is answering your question or not, but I guess just to say there is no easy formula, and we negotiate it with every client differently.
Hi, Jake Gold from the Management Trust. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Jake.
Question for you, and I think I have an answer for this lady. I know with songs, with a lot of the big American television shows, if you're a band that's reached a gold or a platinum status, they have a certain number that they attach to that, whether it's $15,000 or $20,000 on sync, and then another $15,000 or $20,000 for master. But that's what they use, but not everybody. Dan, you use an agency, and you've had a lot of success with it. What kind of fees are you paying them? And there are a lot of companies in the U.S. that are charging fees and wanting percentage of publishing and things like that. Can you expand on that a bit, please?
It's a straight percentage deal. They take between 15 and 20% of what are called both sides of the recording. So when you license a song, actually Jeff Remedios was talking about it before, there's the person who wrote the song, and then there's the person who recorded the song. In our case, it's the same. But typically, the representatives of both of those sides negotiate for themselves, but ultimately agree that as most favored nations, if one side gets $20,000, the other side gets $20,000. In any case, the way the income stream goes is the advertiser or the TV show pays both sides generally about the same amount of money. The agency takes 20% of both sides, and then the publishing revenue goes to our publisher, who cleave off another part. Then the manager takes, as you well know, another part. The U.S. government takes
and rightly so.
The Canadian government, we get what's left.
Because usually we're the one doing the work. But anyways, but to that note, what I find, and I've cut some interesting deals on that, but what I found is when you have different record companies in different territories.
Yeah.
And in most cases, people are asking you to clear things for the world. In a lot of places. I mean, maybe for a commercial, maybe for a territory, but it's for a television show, it's usually for the world.
Mm-hmm. Right.
How do you divvy up the master side? The sync side is not the difficult part, but how do you divvy up the master side in that case?
Well, conveniently for us, we are the record company in most parts of the world. We have license deals with territory by territory that often don't give the licensing record company the right to veto or to determine the value of their market. So there's a prescribed ratio of, Sweden is worth 1% of the world or whatever it is. So if it is for the world, we simply carve off the 1% that of the whole package that we're receiving on the master side and pay it to the record company, and probably in that case actually split that 1% with them,
right,
according to our record deal.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Is that it? Oh. No. That's it? All right then, thank you.
Really great panel. Thank you very much for being bold and frank and giving us lots of ideas about the essential underpinning of what we're trying to do here, which is funding. Thanks again, all of you. You can stay there while we're almost wrapped up here. That was our last panel of a stimulating day here at Digital Dialogue. And I just want to summarize a little bit about what we heard to refresh your mind and send you out with some takeaways. We started out with Clive Thompson this morning, encouraging us to think about the deep shifts public thinking. What happens when we take our private thoughts and say them out loud to a big audience? When you think in public, other people are thinking in public and they talk back to you. Culture gets us talking. Lots of us talking and thinking about what we're watching and reading. He talked about ambient awareness, a way of entering someone's virtual peripheral vision. He said a few ambient signals don't mean much, but months of them form an amazingly nuanced picture. And he talked about the power of weak ties. Something new and useful often comes from someone you barely know. So always sit next to someone you don't know at lunch. He talked about new literacies, video, data, photography. Everyone's an editor now, and we're all data scientists, or can be. He talked about puzzle hungry and what happens when we start collaborating on the things that really fascinate us, and talked about the DNA example. And it was a good question about recency, talking about, are we overweighting what's going on right now and underweighting what's happened before and in the future? We talked about borderless digital universe and how it's really changing our marketplace and relationships. Julie Bristow reminded us that everything has changed out there for all of us except one fundamental thing, and that is a good story is a good story, a good story. And that idea of a good story just came up again in terms of funding. We need to have an impressive and a compelling story, whether it's for crowdsourcing or traditional VC funding. That's what people are looking for. We don't need to be a tech expert. That was reassuring to some of us, but we do need to investigate and explore how people are consuming content, and that's a lot of what you guys are grappling with every day, and we are certainly in the broadcast sphere. We heard some pretty impressive statistics about the video game industry contributing $2.3 billion to the GDP in Canada, employing 17,000 on average 31-year-olds, making an average salary of $73,000, a pretty good career path for somebody out there. We learned how important, essential it is to engage and build communities, and that competition and real prizes, even buckheads, are a huge incentive. So not much difference there between the on and offline worlds. We also heard, again, encouraging that nobody really knows what's going to work. It's a lot of trial and error, trial and fail, and slate producing is a good idea. In the afternoon, we heard about fans and online communities, so important to us, whether it's scaredy squirrel, small audience, small community, but really active, just as important really as a larger audience, which is inactive in the digital world. We're all looking for a meaningful emotional touch point with Canadians, and we need to look at new financing strategies. I was particularly impressed by how those crunch tech experts, the companies, came forward at lunch and delivered in 90 seconds their ideas, and it reminded us all of the real diversity of ideas in Ontario and how much is going on there, and many of us want to make follow-up touches with some of those companies. I think for me, I would summarize, perhaps for many of us, the ideas that were said today. We are creators, driven by passion, but we need to be reminded it is show business, not show hobby. Those are the two realities. Digital dialogue, a really great place for trading all those ideas, stimulating us, and really uncharted territory means huge opportunity, and I guess that's why we're all in it and looking forward to the future. I hope that digital dialogue was as stimulating for you as it was for me. I would very much like to thank the OMDC for inviting me to be the MC today. I took away much more than I gave. It was a real pleasure and an opportunity, and I look forward to meeting some of you again in the future. It's my end here on the stage, but I want to send you out with inspiration, and make sure you please fill out those feedback forms on the app that you were sent, because I really do want to know how they did in organizing the committee. It's a lot of work to put on something like this. And now I'm going to turn over the podium to Alex Brown. She's the vice chair of OMDC's board of directors. She's going to tell us what's coming up next. And on a personal note, sometimes personal and professional collide. And in this case, Alex is a dear friend. She's my personal digital muse who keeps my head charted in the right direction with new ideas from the digital world into the broadcast world. Thank you very, very much for your attention today.
Thank you, Susan. Well, I think it would be pretty much impossible to top the comments and the insights from the panelists and the presenters and the speakers today, so I'm not going to attempt. I think Susan did a fantastic wrap-up. So just let me say on behalf of the OMDC and my role as Vice Chair of the Board that we're very pleased to host today's conference. And we're delighted that so many of you came to participate and to listen and to ask such intriguing questions. Before I let you go, I would like to acknowledge and thank the entire OMDC team. I think they're mostly there in the back. Thank you. And two specific call-outs to the incredibly hardworking Raina Wells here in the front. Raina. And also to May Dalquin. Can you please wave? Everyone, you must know May. She's fantastic. Thank you, May. And a turnaround thank you to Susan Ormondson, our brilliant MC, our superb moderators, insightful panelists, and dynamic presenters. Thank you for your generous contribution and for sharing your ideas today. I'd also like to thank our sponsors RBC and PwC, generous sponsorship of the lunch and networking reception, which you're 30 seconds away from. We couldn't do this without you. So just to wrap, as we all know, the Canadian media industry is evolving rapidly, and that reality brings with it challenges for both the conventional and digital media professionals to adapt to the quickly converging multi-platform environment and to find innovation solutions that will help sustain and grow the industry and its revenue base. The OMDC is committed to supporting these efforts, and I trust that today's sessions have proven valuable for you all to that end. So finally, the RBC networking reception. It's in the gallery just upstairs. It's a chance to meet the companies, make some of those weak links maybe a bit stronger, meet the people who pitched you in the TechCrunch lunch, and to chat with the panelists. So thank you very much. I hope you had a great conference. Please join us upstairs.